Okay, week one of the college football season is here. We talked in our last podcast about tonight's game, Clemson, Georgia Tech. We're going to talk here today about previewing week one's matchups, those to watch, players to watch, things to take notice of, what game's going to be on your mainstream, what's going to be on your little screen. It's fun. It's a good problem to have.
And then your little screen.
Yeah, well, that's,
Then your iPad.
so great. So great that we can use all these different devices to watch our football. But let's get into week one, talk about some of these matchups and what you're looking forward to and what you're wanting to keep an eye on.
Yep.
And we'll start with the early games. We'll just kind of go down that slate of games. Before we do go to the early games on Saturday, again, we did touch in our last podcast about the game of the day and the night and the weekend. Actually, Auburn, Oregon's probably the game of the weekend. But game days at Clemson, are they traveling? Are they moving Saturday?
I don't know.
They might be. That game's in Dallas.
You
I
came
think.
across a little snooty. I'm not going to lie to
I
you.
know. Well, I'm a Clemson homer. So silly. There's a lot of talk about that.
Rightfully so.
Before we jump into Saturday's events, there are two other games tonight that folks should watch or at least keep an eye on, take a look at the highlights. At 7 p.m., UCLA and Chip Kelly will travel to Cincinnati. Cincinnati's a good team, man. They made a run last year in their conference. UCLA is year two of Chip Kelly. Hopefully he's gotten some recruits that can run his system and it'll look a little better. I do like UCLA for the mere fact as a program. Not a huge Chip Kelly fan, but our producer John Razor is an alumni, so I like to follow alumnus. So I do like to follow UCLA. My daughter plays softball and got a great kick out of the UCLA Oklahoma College Softball World Series.
Who won that?
UCLA.
The UCLA?
It was UCLA, and to be honest with you, it was the last game was pretty dramatic fashion. I digress. The other game to look at is the Holy War between Utah and BYU. I'm gonna throw it to you, Dave.
Okay.
Which one of those two games you want to touch on a little bit? Do you want to touch me a little bit? Do you want to touch on a little bit?
Awkward. I would say the one I'm most interested in, assuming that I can keep my hind parts awake, which I will do my very best to, is the Utah-BYU game. Utah has got a lot of hype. I think it's earned. I think they are definitely a good team. BYU, especially early in the season, causes trouble.
They do.
They cause
and
trouble.
The game is at BYU.
Yep. It's at BYU.
This is a rivalry game that a lot of folks may not be aware of, especially in this region of the country, the Southeast, because it's Pac-12, formerly Mountain West team. And BYU is still in the Mountain West, right? Is that still a conference? I think so. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: is you've got in the Pac-12 5 teams starting the season off ranked, and I guess I'd call it the Blue Bloods, if there are Blue Bloods out there. There's at least one.
Yep.
Are not on top. You've got a down year expected for USC after a rough year last year. You've got UCLA, again, as Bill mentioned, trying to find its way. You've got your Washington, I guess. I don't know if I'd really call them a blue blood, but probably another fringe who is going to be strong this year. But Utah, is one of those teams that can they can run it up on you.
They're a tough team.
Yeah.
And that they emulate their coach. Whittingham is a tough coach. I remember hearing something last year at the end of the season. They on one of the radio shows they were talking about which coach would you not like to get in the octagon with. And this guy was I think more than one person said Kyle Whittingham. I mean, the guy's a beast. And the team replicates their coach's
Sure.
persona. They are a hard-nosed, gritty, tough team, really good on the defensive side of the ball typically. And by the way, BYU, I just looked it up. They aren't Mount. They're an independent.
Independent now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with the breakup of the conferences, I know there were some changes there.
I think they were Mountain West. But.
That sounds right. I would say this: with having 5 teams in the top 25, like the Pac-12 does, there's still this feeling that there's some pretenders in there. Stanford coming in at the bottom at 25 is traditionally over the last 10 years plus, certainly since the Harbaugh and then shift to David Shaw.
Love him.
They are, they're generally there, and people aren't even sure. You can see with a 25 ranking, which is low for them, historically.
Yeah.
So,
Look, I don't mean to cut you off, but the reality is if Stanford finds its way to winning the Pac-12 this year, I believe that's 4 years in the past 10 that they've won the Pac-12. That's owning a conference. I love my Tigers. We've done well, but I mean, don't sleep on that. They've almost half a decade of owning the conference if they win this year.
yeah, and they're tough. They play a little bit different style than some of the other Pac-12 teams. Still got living in the old school. I'm dating myself. But they, so the question will be, seeing this game is Utah for real? There's a lot of love for them this year. And yet at the same time, there is some caution. I think I would say with all Pac-12 teams. So I think this is just kind of a fun one. Like I said, BYU is a rough team to play early on. And because
rivalry.
Yeah, and it's a rivalry. I like it. I think it's going to be a fun game, which is kind of I'm taking it from the fan side to watch it. It is possible Utah could open it up. I mean, that's definitely realistic. But I'd like to see a little bit more of this Pac-12 and see how legitimate this is as a conference. It's a conference that has yet, am I correct in saying, is yet to play?
No,
they
Washington.
had they had Oregon too. That's right.
Oregon.
In the first year. They
was
beat
that
Florida
the
State. Yeah, they beat Florida State in
And
the
then
first year.
Washington was in it.
Yeah.
Was it? No, not last year. The year before last.
Yeah, I stand corrected. But but certainly they got rough roads to get in there if they're not undefeated. The Pac-12 right now, if things start to blossom for teams like Washington State, Washington, and truly becomes a strength and maintain ranking, it's a team that could potentially with a 1-loss get in if they stay strong. Now, if they don't, then you're going to be looking for them to run the table. So this is kind of the first step in that process is games like this. And obviously the UCLA game still has some interest in that aspect too as well. So I just think these are fun ones, and it's a chance for us, especially us East Coast guys, to learn a little bit about Pac-12.
I think that's absolutely true. I concur. I think this, we had, not that a lot of people watched the Arizona-Hawaii game, but Arizona is a Pac team. Mm-hmm. They didn't start out well for the conference, obviously. And I think tonight's big for the Pac-12. Obviously, the biggest game of the weekend for the Pac-12 is Saturday when Oregon and Auburn clash. But
Yep.
this tonight, UCLA, it's going to mean a lot for the conference for UCLA to go. That is not going to be easy. Cincinnati is a good team, and for Utah, I mean, there's a lot of hype. Everyone thinks that they could be, when the college football rankings come out, right on the cusp, right on the outside looking in, a 5 or 6, maybe a 7 looking in. All it takes is a little slip up, and there they are.
Yep.
So this is going to be big for the conference altogether tonight, the Pac-12. I think it's important that both teams not just win, but have a good showing. I think they need to win. I mean, I emphasize both teams need to win tonight for the just because who knows what's going to happen Saturday.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 conferences that have to prove their mettle, and particularly in the opening week, and the Pac-12 is one of them, and I think the ACC needs to do it. We know what we got in Clemson, But for the ACC as a conference to be taken more seriously, we look at games. I'll highlight one just as an example is like South Carolina, North Carolina. These are the types of matchups where the ACC tends to trip on themselves early on and kind of start the wrong way. Miami losing to Florida. Now, granted, Florida's favored, but that's going to happen. I mean, you got Alabama playing Duke, and I think that's pretty lopsided.
Well, what hurts, I think, about last weekend's game is that, and it really upside for Miami. If you listen to our podcast about that game, we definitely thought that even though they lost, that Miami had a lot to look forward to this year, whereas Florida, with their number 8 ranking, it did not look worthy of a top 10.
Yeah, and I think that's indicative of the fact that Miami still slipped into the rankings and Florida dropped when nobody else played. Is just that I think that was the consensus taken from the game. Again, I still think it's early to be making too many statements, but I'll give you an example, like a Wake Forest playing a Utah State. I mean, Wake Forest is given 4 points in that game as an example, which, you're talking about a 3-point swing right there. And given a 3, just given that they've got the home advantage. So it's really considered a close game at that point. Like, those are games that the ACC, and for that matter, back to the Pac-12, have to win in order just to build an overall resume as far as a conference goes. You've got SEC is never going to have to prove anything anytime soon, meaning they're walking in with 6 teams ranked. And I'm not always saying that's accurate or legitimate, but they have the reputation to go with it. I think the Big Ten has sustained a reputation. Again, I'm not saying they're always deserved year in, year out, but the ACC, and I go back to the mid-2000s when we added Miami and Virginia Tech, and then certainly added some other teams along the way with Pitt and Syracuse. The expectation was that Florida State, at that time, Clemson was the hopeful up-and-comer, and obviously they've lived up to that recently. And then having Virginia Tech and Miami. I mean, they've wanted nothing more than a Florida State-Miami conference title game, and they haven't even sniffed it in any year. So these are the types of games I think why they're important. These are more conference important games, and I think the Big 12 and the ACC have the most to gain, or else they fall right back into the afterthought. This is where you end up with a coastal team that has 4 losses against a Clemson. We can't have that. So I look forward to some of these games from that perspective. I think this is conference building time.
It is. Now, from that, just to touch again on the UCLA-Cincinnati game. Cincinnati last year went 11-2 in the American. The 2 losses came to UCF, who represented the conference, and Temple, who was actually really, really good last year too. So it's going to be a tough haul for UCLA. Cincinnati was undefeated at home, and it is in Cincinnati. They were 6-0 last year. So these guys, they're not to be trifled with. I mean, at the end of the year, they earned themselves a December 31st bowl game against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech wasn't obviously the most formidable opponent from the ACC that you'd want to throw out there, and they lost to Cincinnati. So it was a closer game, and I definitely think it was a down year for Virginia Tech compared to, several years in the past, but they still lost. They're an ACC team that went in and lost. That's not good for us, but for Cincinnati, point is, they're not to be trifled with. If UCLA goes in there and they're not ready, it's going to be not as warm as Los Angeles. Yep. And I don't think it'll be, really cold by any means, but it's not going to be an easy task.
No. So I think if there's anything that can be done, and just to reiterate, this is where you make your bones. A lot of these games are out of conference. Is you got to show that you can win out of conference, regardless of who the conference is. And, again, we've already taken the Miami loss. I think you can pretty much pencil in that Duke loss. So games like North Carolina, South Carolina matter. NC State's got to get it done against East Carolina. Be nice to see Wake do it because you want to see bowl teams. You want to see your teams go bowling, and that's important stuff. So, those that I think that's kind of what I would look for on tonight's slate.
Yep. And again, Utah is on at 7, so it's you can warm up for the Clemson game by watching a little of that and see how they come out. Again, rivalry game, so I don't anticipate it to get away early from BYU, but it could. As good as they're saying Utah is, I mean, they've got a lot of players coming back to their team, so I'm very interested to see that.
Yep, very very much so. Very much so.
All right. Well, now that we've covered tonight, let's dive into the slate of games that will keep us glued to the TV on Saturday. And again,
No. We got games on Friday, my friend.
Do we?
We do.
How I am unprepared. Who we got?
Well, probably our biggest game we're looking at right now is Wisconsin traveling to South Florida. Wisconsin, the expected winner. Give you an idea line on the game. And again, I don't take the line more than what a line is, which is meant to split the betting. But let's not kid around here. Wisconsin traveling down to South Florida in August. It ain't the greatest weather to play football in if you're not used to it. So that could be a bit of a challenge, like South Florida. It's going to be a high-scoring game. It's going to be
Strong.
Yep, it's going to be about whether Wisconsin can control the clock and run the ball efficiently. If they can wear out South Florida. But if they don't, and it gets into a little bit of a track meet, that weather could come into play. So I look forward to that game. That's on at 7 p.m. I think that's an interesting one to watch.
Again, these are Friday night games.
Yep. You've also got, and this, I wouldn't call it a big game in the sense of expectation, but just in me wanting to see it, is Army playing Rice. Army, for a lot of people, has a lot of dark horse mentality.
They got votes in the AP. They were just outside the top 25, and a lot of folks, I think we might have even touched on it when we did the talk about the AP, like who's in, who should be in, who should be out, who deserves, and I think by the end of the year, just like last year, Army will be back in there.
Yep. So those are going to be some games. You got Purdue going out to Nevada. So that's, again, helping to build the resume of Purdue. Nevada, is potentially, can score some points for them. They got a little bit of a story, not a huge story, but that was the place where Malik Henry, former 5-star out of Florida State and a last chance repeat offender, lost the quarterback battle out there, and so he'll be the backup. So that's a game that's on at 9:30. Those are probably the games I want to watch. UMass at Rutgers does not really tickle my fun spot there, so to speak, is another game. Michigan State gets a home game against Tulsa. So those are some of the games you got on your slate. I think certainly Wisconsin, South Florida will have my attention, and I'll be checking out the Army-Rice game. I want to see a little bit of Army and see how they look going into that. Later on in the night, which are late games, the rivalry of Colorado and Colorado State gets renewed. That's an early season every year, so usually the first game for them. And then also Okie State travels out to Oregon State.
That could be interesting. The mullet, baby.
Yeah.
The mullet. I saw that guy at the College Football Hall of Fame the year before last, and my friend, he walked right in front of me, and Lord Helmet's Moulet is even better in person than it is on TV.
All right, is there a chance, if somebody was to be so bold and try to snatch at it, that it comes off? That's the question.
I don't know.
It is too perfectly sculpted.
I know. It could be an Ace Ventura situation. That type of thing can be done overnight.
The interesting part of the Okie State Oregon State game, which Oklahoma State's definitely going to be a favorite there, is just the over. The expectation is there's going to be a lot of points in that game. So if you want to watch some offense and sling it around, that is going to be a point scoring affair, probably more on the Oklahoma State side. So those are really kind of your wrap ups for Friday. And again, this is just a tune up for a big weekend of football. Nice holiday. Hopefully you got your grill rolling and you get to enjoy that a bit. So what we'll do here is we'll move on to the Saturday games. There are some big games. I will throw this out there right now. It just came across the wire, and I feel a little bit for the Boise State fans on this, but the game has been moved. It will be played on Saturday, but instead of being played in Jacksonville, they've moved the game to Tallahassee.
Oh, wow. That's breaking news right now.
Yeah, that was about 6 minutes ago, just popped up on my phone. That's a smart move. And, before we go all boo-hoo at Boise State, understand Florida State signed a home-and-home with Boise State for this year and next year, and next year's game is in Boise State. So really they gave up the home game to the neutral field. So it's kind of leveling the playing field.
Sure.
The rental car agencies will be out in force for the Boise State fans, so they can drive from Jayville over to Tallahassee.
Ooh,
but
that's not close.
It's not even a 2-hour drive.
Yeah, hour and a half.
Yeah, so it's and it's straight up I-10, which is a lovely scenic route of nothing.
God, nothing to look at.
You just
Prisons.
and then
As our producer chimes in.
You get your midpoint I-75 bypass.
Right. Then I've made it. No, I haven't.
Yeah, so we'll touch on that in a little bit because we're going to hit the early games first. But we get warmed up, and tell me, what are you seeing on Saturday? Your 12:00 games.
All right, I don't want to jump back. Okay, I do want to touch on this, but one quick thing I want to make note of for Friday. You touched on, we want to see the ACC show well. Wake Forest will have a task against this Utah State team.
Yep.
If you don't know him already, Jordan Love, the quarterback of Utah State, is a phenom. He is really good, and you will know who he is by the end of the year. Unfortunately, it's been doted as the year of the quarterback this year, especially in terms of the Heisman, as it is usually a quarterback trophy. Don't be surprised to see this kid's name get tossed in there throughout the season. Last year, the guy had 417 attempts, 267 completions, 64% completion rate. Okay. Dude threw for over 3,500 yards and 32 TDs, only 6 interceptions. He had a quarterback rating of 158.3. This guy is good, my friend. He is a good athlete. Statistically, from his measurables, you're talking about a 6'3", 215 guy. He's not a little dude, okay? He can sling it.
Yep.
And for the ACC and Wake Forest needing to show well, they better be able to put that boy in check. Otherwise, it could be a long night.
Yep.
Or it's Friday night, a long night. All right, jumping into Saturday, though, to address your question. What was your question? What am I looking forward to? Let's go.
Well, I was going to give you the 12:00 games,
Yes.
which I'm still giving you.
Yes.
But let me. I read a little bit more into this Florida State, Boise State game being moved, and this, I will say, does change the complexion of this game, I think, noticeably. Well, this is not confirmed yet, but this is coming from the governor of Florida talking about it. They were preparing the stadium, and the belief is that the game is going to be played at noon. Tallahassee at noon for the boys say, "Oh,
it's gonna be hot for those
you betcha.
Broncos."
You betcha. So there has been that to me is bigger than moving the game to Tallahassee.
I know. I did hear though that Boise State was practicing in an indoor facility with the heat turned up just to kind of adjust themselves. Still, it's nothing like the game time experience, so it could be interesting. Florida State needs to have a good showing.
Yeah, I'm hoping they can fill the stadium with the change. Tallahassee, probably, obviously they're going to have the advantage with fans, and I think at the last point I saw, there's probably about 3,000 tickets sold to Boise State, so it's not a huge movement. But the out-of-town visitors, can they make arrangements? Can they get hotels in Tallahassee and around? Which in a way kind of stinks if they can't. But, again, it's got to be all about safety. But I would say you can say all you want. You can simulate that kind of situation. What's really the difference is Florida State's been practicing in that weather outdoors pretty much every day. Taggart avoids the indoor field as much as possible other than when there's lightning so he can get his guys ready. And I think that matters, especially given a Florida State team that's going to change the tempo of the way they run their offense, certainly from the Fisher years. And last year, I don't even know what tempo they were running at. I think it was backwards.
To me, as we've seen last year and the past several, it's going to come down to your offensive line.
Yeah.
What are we going to see there this year? Are we going to see it, like a hot knife through butter? Or are we going to see some holes opened up for who's a really good running back in Cam Akers?
Yeah. Well, I guess we're going to touch on this game. I'll give you a little bit of some of the feelings of an alumnus myself. We don't know. I mean, we can pretend that we do know, but we don't. Now let's dip in a little deeper on the offensive line because it is the game right there in the sense of how we're going to finish. The line last year, what some people don't realize, the way we were set up. Number one, we went through 10 plus offensive line combinations during the season. No team is going to have success with that. But that being said, I would love to say we were just the worst Power 5 offensive line, but we were actually one of the worst offensive lines in all of FBS football last year. I saw a statistic that was mind-boggling, and it was talking about how many rush yards Florida State had. And they did a simulation of, or not simulation, but just I guess an advanced stat of yards prior to contact. Last year, FSU netted 2 yards rushing. 2 yards rushing.
That's awful.
Before contact. The next closest team was at like 680 yards. It was obscene what had happened with them. Now, let me just go back, and I'm not gonna beat the Jimbo Fisher drum, but you do have to understand what recruiting has done. We had all but one player playing out of recruited position on the offensive line all year. Our best tackle was often injured, Landon Dickerson, who now plays for Alabama. He graduated and left for Alabama. He was a guard. He is a guard. He should be a guard. We didn't actually have a true tackle on the roster that was healthy. And so some things have changed. So here's the way our line's stacking up this year. So our fifth-year center, who was always injured, was horrific last year. And I don't mean to dog one of my guys, but I don't know if he was still injured, but Eberle was just getting
I love
trucked.
Eberle.
Was getting trucked.
Eberle was awesome.
Yeah, for you guys. But this year they've got their true tackle in Juwan Williams. Juwan Williams last year played and graded out awfully, but what people didn't realize is he played with a massive shoulder injury that he should not even have been playing with. But that's how depleted we got. On the left side, I believe he's a redshirt sophomore in Brady Scott. Got some valuable playing time. Again, played out of position, ended up playing tackle at points last year. We've moved on from our center. We've got Bavion Johnson playing in the middle. We're going to see how that plays out there. What is going to be interesting is we are actually starting a true freshman at right guard. He was our highest offensive recruit. So I'm interested to see that. He beat out Mike Arnold, even though they're really listed as oars. All the talk is that he's going to start, so we're going to see how he performs. But he's prototypical, so that's good. We didn't have anything prototypical last year. And then on the right side, we actually went out and went the grad transfer route and got a right tackle, Ryan Roberts. He came out of Northern Illinois. He's a fifth-year senior. So we had to be creative in what we did. And on the offensive line side, obviously, we got one recruit that's a freshman. But we had to go out and get some guys, and he's not the only one we signed on that, either JUCO or the fifth-year senior route. But, again, it's going to be different.
Well, here's some numbers I just want to throw your way from last year. On the defensive side of the ball for Florida State, nationally ranking-wise, you guys weren't all that bad. Your highest was your first downs per game. Your yards per rush allowed. You ranked 21st in the country. Yep. The highest I see is points per game allowed was 89th in the country. Mm-hmm. Other than that, though, it fell somewhere in the 30s, 40s, 50 range nationally for all your defensive rankings.
Yeah, which I would say is somewhat impressive given the amount of time that defense spent on the field. I mean, there were games where there was no offense to be spoken of, and certainly in the second halves of games. I think our interior line on defense is going to be very strong. We've got Marvin Wilson, who is an absolute animal. You're going to see this guy. He's special. He's the next in our line of D tackles. We've got some other space eaters up there that have some speed. Our question is going to be, on the defensive line, can we replace Brian Burns?
Right. And I mean,
and I'm not
considering
sure.
Burns was one of the sack leaders throughout the year, you guys ended up with 2.5 sacks on average per game, 38 in the country. Now, let me flip it.
Mm-hmm.
The offensive side of the ball. There are 2 categories where you did finish. I'm sorry. There are 2 categories where you did finish ranked below 100 nationally. 2 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It's Florida State finished the season in the bottom 15 FBS teams in 6 of these 11 categories, is what it said. Your points per game, you were 114th in the country. Your yards per rush was 2.69, which is 129th in the country. Your third down conversion percentage was 28%, which is 128th in the country. Your sacks allowed per game were 3+, which is 118th in the country. Your time of possession was 27 minutes, which is 118th in the country. That's garbage.
Yep.
That is garbage for Florida State.
It's garbage for
Power
anybody.
5, for ACC. We cannot have that.
Yeah,
and that all goes right into what we talked about with your offensive line.
Yeah, and I'm not going to try to make a rose out of dog poo here, but it is one we got to see. The fact of the matter is, if Florida State can be anywhere from a poor offensive line to a competent offensive line, this team's goes from being good to potentially dangerous. But there's no guarantee of that. I like the change. Again, we got to stay healthy. I mean, health was a huge thing last year, but like I said, we still had guys playing way out of position, and it wasn't good. And this is years of recruiting that we had challenges with. And to be honest with you, other than the championship years, we've always had trouble recruiting. For as much press as our former O-line coach got under Fisher, guys didn't like to play for him. He was a very military-oriented guy, and he had a lot of guys quit on him, and guys that went to other programs. I'm not saying they flourished, but just he struggled on the recruiting aspect. So this has been a long time coming, I guess, is my point. But anyway, if we do that, let me just assure you, one, Cam Akers is the real deal. The guy's a good running back. Again, I go back to that yards before contact. If you can't even get your first step going, nobody's going to be successful.
Right.
Not any running back in the country. He has got the wheels. He can run inside. He can do it all. On the outside, if we can block, watch out for Terry. Tamarian Terry is a beast, and he is going to be good. And we got some other.
What number is he?
15. He will open some eyes this year. I think he's already getting press and pub, but I'm just telling you, he is a special type player. So again, but you can't do any of this. Like when you look at those stats, they all build on each other. You can't do this if you can't block, can't pass the ball, can't run the ball, and then you're down. Your defense gets overworked. So really, if we can't make that happen, then it's going to be a long year. And I think that's why there's all this, most projections, and this is coming from Florida State people in the know, and probably a lot of people nationally, are somewhere between, I say the low end is 6-6, high end is 9-3. Reality is we're somewhere between 7-5 and 8-4. If the offensive line plays competently, I definitely think 9-3 is attainable, but when I say if, I'm not sitting here saying that's what we're going to get. Now, I want to kind of touch on this on two last points, and then we'll move on to another game.
Yeah, you homer.
We did a whole show on Clemson.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, I get 10 minutes.
You do get it.
So
People need to know.
yeah, because this is a team that is looking to make that transition that we made from Bowden to Fisher. The situations were different, but meaning we got to rebuild back to our brand and our name. So I would say one thing I do like about Kendall Briles, past history, not part of the conversation, is we talked about coaches having to adapt to their players. And two things happened with Kendall Briles, and one is him coming here. He's into simplistic offenses. When he first came in, he didn't even bring a playbook. That's how simplistic he wanted to get. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to be dangerous and we're not going to have guys moving around the field, but he knows how to develop an offense that is built around the players that he has. Again, I mentioned this before. He has averaged more than 100 yards per game when he's taken over an offense and doubled points at every stop he's been at. So, again, a scoring offense for Florida State. We're going to play at a much faster pace. Fisher was pro style, was slow. Last year's offense, again, nobody knows what that was, but it was atrocious. So if he does that, that's going to change some things if we can block. And again, this is all predicated off if we can block. So, but he has the football skills to get the most out of what we got. So that's what I'm looking forward to see. And that second point with him is he brought his offensive line coach with him. And that's huge because their philosophies are similar. Unlike last year when we had an offensive line coach from Michigan and a former Florida State guy, and I he kind of got a raw deal. But when you move to Walt Bell as an offensive coordinator midway through the season, it was just a mixture of disaster, and then add in the injuries. The last piece I will talk about is James Blackman. James Blackman, he's skinny. He's skinny. But understand, he came in at Florida State as a freshman, and unlike other freshmen that start, this was a guy who got jumped into the end of the Alabama game after DeAndre Francois got his knee blown out, and amazingly, in a worse situation, because this kid got no reps in fall ball. No reps. And he came in, and the thing I loved about him the most was the team followed him, and he never quit. He throws a great deep ball. Now you got to block for him to get him to see that. And you look at his stats. He came in against NC State last year and threw 4 touchdown passes. Like, he was legit, and he got the pants knocked off him, and he doesn't get hurt for as skinny as he is. I don't think anybody quite will understand what that can translate into until we see it. Briles likes to have a little bit of a running quarterback. He's not the biggest runner in the world. He can move a little bit, but again, I think this adds to it. Now, I'm not telling you we're going to go 11-1 or anything like that, but there is a large step to be taken for Florida State if the offensive line can perform. So that's kind of where I feel about the team, and we'll see where it falls. I won't know. I really can't predict anything until I see us play Boise State, and it's not about Boise State. It's about us. How we come out.
I like it.
All right. So, again, there's no confirmation that the Florida State game will be on at noon at this point, but there is buzz out there that it will be. So, moving on from there, let's talk about the noon games that should happen. All righty then. You haven't even got me started, buddy. All right. So, talk to me about 12 o'clock. Give me some of the games that you're looking to watch week 1 on Saturday.
You've got East Carolina and NC State. Obviously, as an ACC guy, I have a little bit of interest of seeing that. Toledo and Kentucky, I don't know what Kentucky's going to be with Benny Snell gone and Allen gone. And we'll see. And Toledo, sometimes they can put up a fight. You've got the Lane Kiffins traveling to Ohio State. I think they're getting paid $1.4 million.
Smart move.
Look, say what you want about Lane Kiffin. He was on an interview the other day, asked about, playing this game, like, why playing this game? What's the benefit for FAU to go play this game? And the guy, at least he's honest, said money.
Yep.
Money. And that's what builds programs, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, and let me say this. go back and look at a little bit of history. Ohio State wins big in the early season in the first game, but they start slow.
They do.
And I'm talking about teams like Ohio. They
Maryland.
played, yeah. So I'm not by any means predicting a upset. I'm just saying, just watch.
I mean, I'll want to tune into that game just to see what Ohio State's offense
Justin
does.
Fields, yeah.
I want to see what Justin Fields is worth. I do believe that their running back J.K. Dobbins could run himself into the Heisman conversation.
Yep.
I'm not saying he's going to be there, but he could run. He's not. He's pretty much the guy this year.
Yep.
And he could run himself into the conversation. So
let me just jump in here real quick with one point on that game too. Is I had an interesting take last night. Urban Meyer's on the Fox Sports panel, and obviously he knows this team very well. He knows the coach that took over for him. The interesting thing is even he admitted the drop off from Justin Fields, the quarterback position, is significant. That's coming from Urban Meyer, who is not the most. He's not the most. I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. He's not real. There's a word, and I'm blanking right now. He's pretty arrogant. I guess. What's the word I was looking? Modest.
Modest.
Oh man, when I can't remember modest, I'm in trouble. But so for him to say that said something to me. And what was very interesting, and I'll just bring up this point, just something to watch, and not just this weekend, but beyond, is the idea that they need, because that drop off, they need to keep Justin Fields protected. So if he's protected, what they're saying is they're expecting less run, more passing, which is not the MO that Georgia played him with last year. Obviously, all he did was run.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to kind of see that dynamic play out if it's, and really is the drop off that significant. So that's just a little cookie to chew on.
I guess of the noon games, depending on your game, the Ole Miss Memphis game is probably the biggest noon head-to-head matchup in terms of Memphis gave UCF all it could handle in the championship game last year of the American.
Memphis is a tough team.
They're a tough team.
They're given points, just so we're aware. So I mean, there is definitely a belief that Memphis is going to be in this.
Listen, to cross over into both fantasy and NFL, the whole Zeke Elliott situation, the Tony Pollard kid that they've been talking about at Dallas, the running back taking his place, he came from Memphis.
Yep.
They
got a history of running backs.
So that'll probably be the most interesting game of the day. Keep in mind, these two schools are only like a couple hours
apart
from each other.
Yep.
It's actually an old kind of baked-in rivalry based on proximity. So there's going to be kids that played each other in high school that are going to be playing each other in this game. So I'm interested to see. With Ole Miss losing their two top wide receivers who really were everything last year for them, how they're going to look. Now, yes, they usually have some pretty good talent at the wide receiver position, so I expect to see some new names there that you'll know by the end of the year. Their quarterback, we'll see if he progresses this year.
Sure.
I don't know. It could be, again, I don't hate to be an ACC guy, homer all the time, but the SEC is the powerhouse conference in college football. Even their lower team like an Ole Miss, we want to take a little hit right out the gate. It would be good.
Listen, and let me just say that word.
Maybe Ole Miss will see later on will upset somebody.
Yeah, let me just say this. I'm not going to apologize for being an ACC homer. I mean, the SEC chants their conference at games.
True.
So there needs to be a little bit of that baked into this show because we are who we thought we were.
That's right. There's enough out there about the SEC. Now, we try to cover it all.
Yep.
But there's no denying the fact that you will hear bias from my end for Clemson and for the New York Giants. You will hear bias from Dave's end for Florida State and the Chicago Bears. And you'll hear bias from both of us on the ACC.
Yeah, well, now, listen, we're going to be objective in the way we look at it, but we have rooting interests just like any fan of college football, and that's where you'll hear it, is in the rooting interest. We're not going to Paul Feinbaum this joint, that I can tell you.
No, we don't want to do that, and, I definitely feel like our tone and we're more entertaining. We know how to use voice inflection as opposed to being Paul. Hey, call Paul. How you doing today?
And we both have
Paul
normal
Fine.
size ears.
Well, yeah, okay.
All right, so 12 o'clock.
So, well, before we go into that, I did mention a second ago the quarterback for Ole Miss, and I didn't want to. I was blanking on his name, so I was just looking to see if I could find it. But he is he from Hawaii? He's got that Samoan type name.
Then wouldn't he be from Samoa?
No, well, no. I mean, like, isn't that Hawaii part of Samoa?
I don't know.
Jordan Ta'amu. Jordan T-A''AMU. Jordan Ta'amu. That's the kid. Actually, I remember watching a few games last year. He's a big kid, man. I mean, and he's got an arm. So it's interesting to see. Now, here's another thing that I believe, yes, he is. Pearl City, Hawaii is where he's from. If I'm reading this correctly, Matt Corral is a backup quarterback on their roster. Wasn't Matt Corral? No, he wasn't in QB1. He was at the opening. I remember him as one of the guys competing at the opening, and they talked a lot about him. So, but it's about this Jordan Ta'amu kid. He's 6'2", 210. He's a smart kid, apparently. He's a criminal justice major. He was on the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm watch list last year. He was an NFL Combine invitee. So what does that mean? Does that mean he's a senior? I don't know. I'm getting you all mixed up. But I believe he's, junior. Yeah, he might be gone. Could I be wrong? Maybe it will be the Matt Corral show. I don't even know. So that's something to look for. Ole Miss's quarterback. There you go.
All right. So is there any other 12ers you want to talk about?
That's about it for the 12ers. I mean, aside from what we know, you already dove into Florida State if they get moved there, but that's it for the 12ers, and then it starts to heat up even more in the afternoon. So let me go to those games, and then I'll throw it at you.
Okay.
Going to be much harder because you're going to have multi-screen going. You already said earlier, 3:30, North Carolina, South Carolina. Who's the Carolina? That is going to be played, I believe, in Charlotte. It's a neutral site.
Okay.
You also have Alabama and Duke. That's here in Atlanta, isn't it?
I believe
I
so.
think so.
I believe that's a Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, that's a Chick-fil-A. Yeah, Virginia Tech and BC, which is good for ACC to watch because that's a game that's a coastal versus an Atlantic game.
Yep.
You have Northwestern going to Stanford.
Like that one.
That could be pretty good. That's a 4:00, and so is Virginia Tech BC. The others are 3:30. So from those, what are you looking for? Who do you want to watch?
All right. The game I want to watch most, just from ins and outs, is going to be the Stanford Northwestern game. I am, I like both their coaches immensely. Class act guys on both sides. Interesting, coming from two different conferences with two different strategies, they do have somewhat similar game styles.
Yeah, well, that's Stanford. They're the one kind of green thumb that sticks out of the Pac-12, as opposed to all those spread kind of throw it downfield all day long. Yep. They are built more like an SEC school, built strong in the trenches. I think I posted something recently on Javon Swan, their D tackle. This kid could be the next Aaron Donald, and they run the ball well.
Yep.
You got guys like Bryce Love that was running. They're big in the trenches, so they're built more like an SEC than a Pac-12.
Yeah. Certainly, even maybe Big Ten type.
Sure.
And Northwestern to me, and this is what I love about Fitzgerald. If you don't know the story about how he became a coach and the previous coach passed away, I believe it was a cancer, maybe a brain cancer. It was something pretty intense. Did it with complete class. And this is Northwestern to me is the lunch pail. Better strap your helmet on team when you play them.
Yeah.
They can do some things. And this is, understand this is equivalent to a Vandy. I mean, Northwestern is an extremely good academic school. So he has standards that he has to meet and he lives up to them.
Yeah. Or Georgia Tech for that
Yeah,
matter.
yeah,
You
yep.
got to, they don't cheat themselves in terms of these kids
Yeah.
having to have the grade point average.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, Stanford is in that same class easily.
Oh, for sure.
So, to me, I find a lot of class coming out of these organizations on several levels, from the coaches to the players, the education standards, and then just to watch them get after it. They get after it the same way. So I think that's going to be a pretty fun game to watch. It's again, I'm using a lot of spreads when I'm not a big believer in spreads, but the reality is it's expected to be a close game. So I think that will probably be the most fun to watch. Just from an overall perspective.
Well, one thing I'm excited about with that game, again, it always ties back to my Tigers. We should see our man Hunter Johnson starting. Now, Hunter Johnson, 3 years ago, I believe it was 3 years ago, the number one pro
5-star,
quarterback recruit in the country. And as you may or may not know, was recruited to Clemson. Sat behind Deshaun Watson and Kelly Bryant, and then Zarek Cooper. Deshaun moves on. Kelly earned his stripes, but then you started to see Zarek Cooper when they were paid. It was kind of like they were both the number two. I kind of feel like Hunter might have felt he was number three, because when they did bring him in, they usually went to Zarek first.
Okay.
And then fast forward to last year, Trevor Lawrence comes aboard. Zarek bails.
Yep.
Hunter then bails and goes to Northwestern.
This is before the season started.
Right. So especially with all this transfer portal stuff. So he was not eligible last year. He was there before the season started, but wasn't eligible. So he had to sit. So this is the year we should see Hunter play. He's from Indiana. I saw him get some time at Clemson. The kid's got a heck of an arm, and he's smart, obviously, which is more important in some aspects than the athleticism of the quarterback.
Sure.
I think that Deshaun Watson is a hell of an athlete. I think the greatest thing about him was his head. He was a smart guy, and he was constantly studying. And that's, I think you're going to get something like that. I think that's
And he
just
is
built
a compete level that's
Sure.
really hard to rival.
So that's what I'm excited about that game in particular. I just, again, from my own Homer perspective, I liked Hunter Johnson. I wish he had got time at Clemson. I would have loved to see what he would have done. Even if he had beat out Kelly last year and was our starter, he was still going to have to face up against number 16. And, that's a generational
Probably losing.
talent.
That's a losing battle.
Right. So I don't fault him for doing what he's doing, but I am excited to see him. And to your point on it, he was a class act. He never talked junk. He did his thing, got good grade. He did what he had to do, what the coaching staff asked him to do, and did it the best he could. Now he's got an opportunity at a place with another solid coach, as you mentioned. He fits right in the mold with, I think, the type of lunch pail mentality. Hell, like I said, he's from Indiana, so he's from. Northwestern's right next door.
Yep.
So that's what I'm looking for in that game.
That should be a lot of fun to watch. I would say my other game, I got really two games I'm looking at, and we already kind of talked about it a little bit, is the South Carolina, North Carolina. As you know, I've used this term, the brand and everything, and I think it's past time for us to develop our brand and as an ACC. And I think this is just this is the chances. This is what builds that resume to get you to start being looked at by recruits to where you can start to develop your program. So,
and this year, a lot of people are saying this is the best team that Muschamp has had out there. Preseason, didn't like getting asked in media days about being the little brother of the Clemson in the state of South Carolina. Completely offended.
But
I laugh at that. But, they have a chance. I mean, everybody made fun of how long Hunter Renfrow was at Clemson. I mean, everybody thought the kid was a lifer. But South Carolina's quarterback,
Is it still Jeff Garcia? That guy was there forever.
he was there forever. No, it wasn't Jeff Garcia. It was Steven Garcia.
Steven
Jeff
Garcia. Garcia was the
played
quarterback.
for-
Whatever.
Yeah.
It was Garcia. He was always winning a game and then getting drunk.
Nice. No, they've got. Why is it slipping my name? My South Carolina. See, this is how much I,
He was about to make fun of him and then he forgot who he was. So
this is how much I can't stand our arch rival in the Gamecocks. So no, but it's Jake Bentley. His dad is, I think, the receivers coach, quarterbacks coach over there. I don't know, but Jake Bentley. I feel like the kid's been there forever. Not a bad quarterback. I don't think he's elite. He's certainly not Trevor Lawrence. But again, the guy's been in the system forever, and this is the year for him to do big things. So, this is a team, like I said, that is supposed to be the best one Will Muschamp has had.
yep. So that I think that again, that's a stage setter for a season. And don't forget, we're bringing back the guy, Mac Brown, to North Carolina.
That's a great thing, dude. I mean, I don't know if he'll be able to get the success he had in his younger years at Texas, but I like Mac Brown. It's good for- if he does find anything for North Carolina, it's going to be good, and he's a good coach and he's well known.
North Carolina was the most successful under him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a known coach. A few years ago, we brought in Babers, we brought in Fuente, you brought in Bronco Mendenhall.
Yep.
And so here again, we're adding. It's important for our conference to have these big name coaches there, and then post that, it's important for them to have levels of success in growing the program.
Yep. I think we'll move on from those games, and certainly we'll be flipping around to everything, but those are some of the bigger games.
One thing I do want you to quickly touch on is Alabama Duke, and I know we might have broke it. Yeah, we put it on the thing, but in the wake of Dylan Moses, their inside linebacker. I'm not an Alabama guy, but I do feel for it. I mean, these are kids, y'all. I feel for it. This guy is a first-round draft status. I could care less about Kuiper's view, but I think he had him as a number 12 overall pick for next year. This is the quarterback of their defense, the heart and soul of their defense, the play caller in their defense. This is the next guy in a line of great Alabama linebackers that this was his time. And he had a great year last year, but this year was his year. And I feel for the kid. And in practice, no less. As a fan, you just are biting your lip. Like, golly, why? If it was going to happen, why couldn't it have been maybe in a big game that he was making a big play and it just happened?
Yeah. I mean, it is a shame for the kid. And interestingly with him will be there's already talk, and not, this isn't the time to speculate about it, but the talk is whether he even comes back next year. Is it worth his draft stock? Is it going to be hit that hard in order to risk another injury? So
what do you feel about that? Let's take a minute on that. Do you think the guy will choose? Because right now they say it's a season-ending injury. It's an ACL.
He's got surgery. That's it.
Right.
So
So January is a long way away.
Yep.
Some ACL surgeries, if it's a clean tear, you can make it back in 4 months. That would put us right. You can, if it's a clean tear. You saw QB1.
Yeah.
The kid tore his ACL, the Nick Scalzo, and they said it's a surgery 4 months because he was a clean tear. He didn't mess anything else up. Yeah. So now that I think that's optimistic regardless, but you never know. The individual might have just a heart of gold to work to get back. So maybe he's back at the end. But that said, should he not? What do you think? Come back for another year?
Well, I'll take it in two parts. Number one, no way he comes back this year, and not even if he was physically able to perform. What is the value at that point in the season for him from a draft stock perspective to come back in the same year? Because, one, he won't be the same player. He's going to have missed all that time. I didn't even know that was possible. I've heard 6 months is a minimum. But I won't play doctor on this, but I'll just say if Alabama is in the national title hunt, okay, which I'm not telling you losing him pulls them out. If there's one thing they've been able to replace, it's on the defensive side of the ball.
They will be replacing him because the other linebacker also, I think, took a ding earlier in the offseason. So they've got 2 freshmen replacing those inside linebackers.
Yeah, which again,
they're athletes. They're fives. Those guys, they don't, rebuild. They reload.
Yeah.
And the problem is he's the signal caller on the defense.
True.
So that youth, it's going to take some bumps and bruises to know what they're doing.
Yeah. If I'm not going to worry about one side of the ball at Alabama, it's going to be on the defensive side. And so I think they can replace him. And the question is, if they've gotten that far without him, the question becomes, what does he add that's so significant that doesn't put him at risk? But the real question to me is, does he come back and play next year? I think you'd certainly have to look at draft stock. He's obviously going to get all kinds of workouts. He's going to get tested in the combine, and if they feel like he's stable, they're going to take him. And this is where I take from this. As a Bears fan, one of our premier defensive players was Eddie Jackson, and he is an all-pro safety, maybe the best in the league, but certainly, as an all-pro, he's one of the top 2 or 3, and at least
Where did he come from?
Alabama. So, and here's the thing is, this is a guy that slipped to the 4th round because of a broken leg. And a broken leg is recoverable. It's not ligament damage. And people slept on him, and it didn't work in anybody's favor but the Bears. So I'm all for it. But what's interesting about it is he made a comment when they asked him as a rookie, how do you feel about your first training camp in the NFL? And his answer is, it was a piece of cake. I went to Alabama.
Yep.
So here's the point of this. Not to throw, sunshine at him, but part of the reason why I think Alabama players, some have struggled going into the NFL, is the beatings they take under the program that is Nick Saban. And is that beating worth that value? And one, I don't know that he's going to lose that much value because, again, the NFL is going to do all their due diligence and check out and make sure that he's healthy. And the question is, has he put enough on tape to show them that he is worthy of that pick? And so my guess is, if I had to crystal ball this one, I would say he doesn't come back. I don't know that there's the value in it for him. But again, some of that has to do with recovery. If there's questions about his health from the NFL, and he'll get feedback before he declares, if there's questions about it, then he might have to come back to prove it. But I would say, if there's no question about how he recovered from his surgery, I would say he doesn't come back.
Interesting. My take on the whole loss of Dylan Moses, number one, I do think David Cutcliffe is Duke's head coach, and he's a smart guy. And I do think they're going to adjust their scheme a little bit to pick on those linebackers, whether it be tight ends, running backs.
Only be smart.
Yeah, using screen plays left and right, just because
maybe some motion.
Yeah, to get these young guys out of position. If they're in the hunt at the end of the year, I don't think he'll be needed to come back in terms of Dylan Moses, because I think by that time these guys, the freshman linebackers, will be ready to go. Okay, it won't matter if they're in the hunt and they're in the college football playoffs at the end of the year, having run these freshmen at inside linebacker. By that point in time, they'll have their ish together.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of him coming back, I don't know, buddy. I don't know if I agree with you. And here's why. He watched our entire defensive line come back from Clemson last year, and we played them. And the reason is those guys came back because they felt they had unfinished business. I believe this guy, in his mind, especially after the drumming they took, and this was his year, has unfinished business. So I would not be surprised to see him come back and play for the Tide next year.
All right. Well, I'll put my bow on this. The generations have changed. This is the selfie me generation, and think about how we talk about the changes in college football in a previous podcast. The reality is we got guys sitting out seasons almost. Bosa. You got guys not playing in bowl games that are big bowl games. You can give me the national championship. I got you, unfinished business, but that's more rare in college football than it's ever been. The mentality just to go to the NFL has changed some of the college landscape. But again, I'm not a prognosticator with this. I want the kid to do what's best for him. I get it. Like, I do get this. There's just too many millions of dollars floating around, and the shelf lives are not, for every guy that plays 15 years in the NFL, there's 100 guys that play practice squad for 2 years.
Right.
So, and that includes elite talents. I mean, granted, they don't give up on us quickly when they're high draft choices, but they still give up on them. The Bears, Kevin White. Kevin White, a couple of injuries. The guy played all of 10 games for the Bears in 4 years, and now he just got cut by Arizona. And Arizona, little soft in the talent department. So my point is it can happen.
Yeah.
And that's a number 7 pick overall. So, we'll see what happens.
Good. Well, I didn't want to take too long, and we took longer than I wanted, but that is definitely something I wanted to address. So look for
ultra talented. Let me just leave it at that.
Yeah, let's see if it affects Alabama's game, and on the flip side, if I'm correct, if Cutcliffe and the Blue Devils of Duke do adjust their game a little bit to pick on those linebackers and get them out of place.
They better. And let me say this: if you want to talk, I don't worry about them on defense, but I will say this: they lose Tua, and it gets ugly. That's my bet. And I think that's the one position they are vulnerable in. I think they got receivers, they got O-line, and the defense. To me, you can cover up the linebackers because their front line and their back end are strong enough. But that could be an interesting one to keep a look.
Yep. All right. Evening games on Saturday. We don't know what you guys are doing.
We'll just say we've already discussed.
We've already discussed. So then you've got a slate of 4 7:30 p.m. games where Virginia travels to Pitt. Georgia goes to Vandy. Miss State goes to Wyoming. And then the big one, Auburn, Oregon. And then later that night, we will have Fresno State going to Southern California. That's the 10:30 game.
Yep.
Let's not talk Auburn, Oregon just yet because that really is the matchup of the
game.
weekend.
Yep.
Let's talk to me about some of those other games and what you think.
All right. Well, certainly, again, going back to our ACC side of it, the Virginia Pitt game is Virginia ready to take that next step? Can Bronco Mendenhall, really make it happen for them? I mean, they've got some proving to do. They certainly, there's a belief there's talent there for them to make a serious run at the Coastal. And this game's on the road at Pitt. Virginia's given a few points, so they're on the road. So you're looking at a inside of a touchdown type game is what the expectation is on that.
Pitt's given us trouble. I mean, they did represent the Coastal last year, so they can be a thorn in a lot of folks' side on that side. I think they're one of the teams that is the prime reason the Coastal is, you can never look at it and say, wow, that's it, because they kind of beat up on each other.
They do.
And Pitt's one of those teams that manages, they may not be great, but they'll manage to go into a game against the team that's leading the Coastal at the time and take them down.
And hurt a season. Yep, definitely. And they've got that, their receiver, French.
French.
He's very
When
talented.
they sent that jersey to the printer, do you think the printer
I think there was
sent
a call.
him an email back?
Yep.
And
just want to double check.
Right?
Yep.
Are we supposed to have this many consonants in a row at the beginning of a name?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it'll be fun to watch him, see how they adjust. They ended the season in the ACC at least getting beat up in a pretty ugly weather game, but it was a beating from Clemson. And just, what do they learn from that? And then how do they apply it to a pretty tough opening game?
Yeah, I mean, the things to watch in this game from the Virginia side, I mean, I really couldn't tell you a whole lot on the Pitt side. But who is Narduzzi's their coach? Mm-hmm. Good coach. You talk about lunch pail mentality. That's that guy.
Yep.
Bryce Perkins, the quarterback at Virginia.
Yep.
This guy's supposed to be a stud, so let's see what he does. On the flip side, and I'm looking right quick because I can't remember his last name. It's another Bryce. Bryce
there was Hall, the
Bryce
corner.
Hall, number 34, the corner, could be the number one corner taken in the draft this year.
Yep.
He's a stud. He's 6'1", 200-pound senior. He's a stud. So number 34 on the defensive side of the ball for Virginia, Bryce Hall, the corner. Look out for him. And then obviously the quarterback for Virginia, Bryce Kelly. Or Bryce Perkins. Number 3. He's supposed to be all that in a bag of chips.
Yeah, so I think that'll be a fun one to watch. You know, no particular rooting interest on that end because it is an ACC game, but you know, you want to see who's taking the steps, and that's a good game. So I think another one I want to watch, and it's more for a player, is Georgia Vandy. Vanderbilt's running back is going to open some eyes.
I told you earlier.
Go ahead.
Bringing the kids to soccer yesterday. Mm-hmm. And we'd carpool because it's kind of far away. And the people that bring home, we live in Atlanta, so Georgia fans left and right. I love Georgia fans. I look at them and smile because they think they seem to forget they haven't won a national title since 1980. But I guess there are three. My daughter and 2 other girls that carpool. One of the other girls is a Clemson. Her dad went to Clemson, and the other girl is Georgia. Her parents went to Georgia, and the father of the Georgia girl took him to carpool the other day and was poking at Clemson's strength of schedule. 44-16, buddy. Okay, you had your shot at Bama twice and had them, and you couldn't close the door. But I told the kids, I said, well, if he's giving you a ride home today, and if he starts talking football again, just lean over the back seat and say, hey, what do you think about Keyshawn Vaughn? And if he doesn't know who he is, because he may not, then just say, you'll know who he is by the end of the game. Sorry, Go ahead.
Yeah.
Keyshawn Vaughn.
Just to give you an idea, this kid's 5'10". He's almost 220 pounds. Very fast. You watch his highlights. He had 157 carries last year for 1,200 plus yards and 15 touchdowns. He was a transfer from Illinois, and he sat out a year, played last year. This is his year. He could be one of the elite backs coming out after this year. Just interesting to watch. You know, again, I think, you know, man for man, Georgia's going to take him in this game.
Sure.
Just they're a strong team, but he's someone to watch.
Keep in mind, you know, I mean, Kyle Shurmur, my New York Giants head coach, Pat Shurmur's son, was their quarterback last year. He's gone. He set, I think 4 out of 5 passing records for the school. Mm-hmm. And then one that he wasn't number 1 in, he was number 2. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was behind Cutler or whomever, but he's good, and he's gone. That's going to cause trouble. So expect Georgia, I think, to stack the box. They know who this kid is, you know, just because all the fans may not. The talk is that this kid could be one of the best running backs, if not the best in the SEC. Georgia is going to have to say something to say with DeAndre Swift on that.
Yep.
It'll be interesting. I'm excited to see in that regard, who of those two is going to have a better game.
Yeah.
DeAndre Swift, we know who he is.
Yep.
This Keyshawn Vaughn kid, you'll know who he is, not just after the game, but certainly at the end of the season. But is he, you know, I mean, sitting now in their dormitories, DeAndre's, you know, the past couple days, there's been a lot of talk about Keyshawn Vaughn. And you got to think DeAndre Swift's like, oh, I'm ready to show the world that this guy's nobody.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see that. And Fromm. Love Jake Fromm. Not a Georgia guy, but I do love Fromm. He is just a class act.
Class act.
And, you know,
And talented, very, very good at staying within the system. Not a game manager, but he goes out and gets it done. So I mean, Georgia's an excellent team. Whether we got to listen to Georgia fans or not, you have a little more to talk back with than I do, but it is a very good team. So watch the running style, watch the lanes they get. I mean, and understand, while DeAndre Swift might outgain him in this game, just given the sheer power of the whole team, I think you're going to see some fun to watch.
yeah,
And-
I mean, this kid he may be way more effective for his team than Swift, I guess, if that makes sense.
And besides that game, I would say one other game where I want to watch a player is Missouri-Wyoming. I want to see Kelly
Is it
Bryant.
Missouri or Miss State? Oh,
No, Missouri-Wyoming.
it is Missouri. Sorry, I said Miss State. Yeah, I do want to see that.
I'd like to see Kelly Bryant in that offense. Guy got kind of a tough deal. I mean, it wasn't wrong what happened. I mean, again, generational talent in Trevor Lawrence, but
It's just
but
me,
talented.
Kelly B.
Yep. So I like to see that. I mean, I'm just to kind of poke around and watch how he's doing.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
But other than that, I would say I think it's time to wrap this up with some Auburn, Oregon.
Yeah, like I said, there's a 10:30 Fresno State, who actually was real good last year going to Southern Cal. You talked earlier about Blue Bloods.
Southern Cal's down.
We'll see. With
Can they get back up?
With their JT Daniels kid. I mean, the good thing is they started him as a freshman. They took their lumps. He didn't look all that bad. He certainly didn't, I don't think, lost those games for him. So we'll see if Southern Cal makes a statement. It's not going to be an easy game for them. Fresno State is a good team.
Yep.
And, it's another California team, so they're going to.
And they're close enough in each
play.
other's neck of the woods
Sure.
that you can get some movement around there. Yeah,
Yeah.
that could be another interesting game.
All right. Well, we've built it up. So we're going to take one quick sec, but to you won't even know it. How about them apples? But then we're going to dive into Auburn, Oregon. See, you didn't even notice we were gone. You didn't even notice we had to go use the latrine. That's a little too much information. Auburn, Oregon, my man. I am excited. I mean, I'm excited for our game tonight. I like me some Justin Herbert and Oregon Ducks.
The Herb.
They, this is it. This is, we've been talking about these Pac-12 games, and Pac-12 getting themselves into the conversation this year and moving forward and having an impact on the college football playoff. This is it. This is, as we said the other day, the crescendo for them right out the gate. And it has been the past few years with Auburn, Washington. I think that was the past 2 years back to back.
Yep.
And they haven't been able to get it done, despite still ending the season with some good teams. Keep in mind, 2 years ago is when Washington was in the playoff.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. This is a big one. This is a big one, Billy.
Oh, Billy.
Oh, the old Billy Baroo. So let's talk. What do you think about this game? What are you looking for? What do you Let's start with Auburn's side of the ball.
Okay.
The Gus Bus.
Yep.
Picking the old Bo Nix, and everybody this week has seen the picture of Bo Nix when he was a little kid at the Auburn-Oregon National Championship game. Who's the little guy there? It's Bo Nix when he was a kid, and here he is.
Yep. Here he is. So what I think makes this game interesting, I'm going to kind of go back to something I said about the Pac-12 having a chance to make its mark as a team. Obviously, Auburn being in the SEC, Oregon being able to make its mark as a team from the Pac-12 and kind of develop their following, and more importantly, to prove that they are a legitimate conference, as we move through the year. Auburn doesn't have that issue being in the SEC, meaning if they win, the credibility is already there. But what does spin them is, and Bo Nix is an example of this feeling, is Malzahn's on a little hotter seat than anybody wants to really talk about in the old town of Auburn. There's a guy that's had some windows, and you can only get your stuff pushed in by Alabama so many times, because that is, I mean, go to an Alabama TV station website after the Alabama-Auburn game, and I guarantee you somewhere in the list of the top 5 headlines will be about one family member murdering the other over this game. And I kid you not, that is a real thing. This is as heated a rivalry in the state of Alabama as there is anywhere around the country, to the point of ridiculousness if I'm talking about people killing each other. But because of that, Malzahn is under some fire. And this is a team that's believed to have an immensely talented front four on the defense, which is a nice little kind of side game happening with the ultra-talented Justin Herbert and the Ducks offense. So
everybody's back, my friend. And they're
Yep.
go ahead.
No,
I'll dive into my
so
thing
to
to
me, like, I think, Oregon has to begin to establish for the conference and for themselves, don't get me wrong, because Oregon is not flying low under the radar. They've got a top, 11, I believe they're ranking. So you've got a clash for two different reasons of teams trying to prove who they are. So I'm excited to see how this plays out. You'll hear this offense has never seen an SEC defense and all that jazz. And it might be true. It might play out that way. But there is desperation in Auburn.
Yeah.
There's desperation in Auburn.
One thing you've seen SEC teams be susceptible to is a high-powered, fast-paced, spread-type offense.
Yep.
Especially the powerhouses in the conference like your Alabamas. The teams they struggle with, like an Ole Miss or one that'll sling it all over the yard. You've got what is touted as possibly the best offensive line in the country in Oregon, going up against what is touted as possibly the best defensive line in the country in Auburn. I look forward to that.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to that battle in the trenches and see who wins. I said it before. I like Justin Herbert. I think he's going to be immensely successful in the NFL because in today's NFL, you need a guy that can be still that pro-type quarterback, but still can move. And I'm not talking move like Michael Vick. I'm talking about extend plays, moving out of the pocket, moving around in the pocket, still keeping your eyes downfield and slinging the ball.
Yep.
And that's what he does. And that's what the college game trickling in the NFL, I think, is most prevalent in the quarterback position.
Yep.
It's not, I've seen Lamar Jackson live and in person in Death Valley. He is a specimen.
Yep.
I'm not talking about that type of specimen. I'm talking about like Deshaun, like Patrick Mahomes, like Baker Mayfield, guys that are not looking to run. They can, but they extend plays in order to throw the ball downfield. And that's what I think Herbert's going to be great at in the NFL. It's going to be a fun game, man. I completely agree with you on the Malzahn thing because I'll tell you, again, we're in Atlanta, and there are tons of Auburn fans here as well. And I'll tell you, Auburn fans know this is it. This is going to be, look at their schedule is a beast this year. They've got, let me pull it up right here for you. And I'm blanking because I can't find it. But they've got a.
I'll jump in while you're looking for that.
Oregon. They go to Texas A&M in week 4. They go to Florida in week 6, which might not be as daunting of a task now as we think. They go to LSU in week 9. They play Georgia in week 12 at home, and they play Alabama in week 14 at home. Gus, his keister's burning.
Yeah, and what they can afford to be is irrelevant come Alabama. I think and there's a very real possibility they could be with that schedule. What I also like, and I want to give a lot of credit here, is to the coach at Oregon, Cristobal.
Love him.
This is a guy.
He's a Florida State guy.
Yeah, well, just understanding this is a guy that was the offensive coordinator under Taggart. The team was turning around. And just like Fisher leaving for Florida State, it created chaos. Taggart leaving for Florida State created chaos in Oregon. And he organized that chaos certainly better than Taggart did last year. Little different scenario, but still, there was talk that, some guys were going to get poached. And while he's not there, Leavitt at the time was talk as his defensive coordinator going to Florida State. And he held on to him. And so the point is, this guy's a good coach. He's a good recruiter. He was able to do some things last year that were pretty impressive with that offense in a season of some level of flux. And I will tell you, I'm gonna throw a player out there that I'm really interested to see what kind of time he gets, and that is the number 1 overall recruit last year.
I was hoping you'd bring him up.
Yeah, Kayvon Thibodeau, who Florida State was in a little bit of a
from
battle.
LA, I think.
Yeah,
LA.
well, West Coast, I know
Oaks
that.
Christian High School in South Central LA.
Now, I know him from following him from the fact that when Taggart left, he was high on us for a while. Now, the season played out and that dissipated. But he was crystal balled to us way early, but crystal balled to us, meaning that's how tight that was. But even more interesting was he had offers from Alabama, and Cristobal won that war. And so on the defensive side of the ball, which if you look at their players, they've got a good linebacker in Troy Dye, but most of their profile players, C.J. Verdell, their running back, Juwan Johnson, their receiver.
Juwan Johnson's pretty good.
Yeah, and Matt Mariota, a little name recognition, is the tight end there for them.
Brother?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Juwan Johnson, 6'4", 231. That guy's a beast, number 6.
Yeah, so even though on the offensive side of the ball, I'm curious to see, and I will say this, in looking at film and stuff that I did last year, Thibodeau is built to play today. He is a real DN. He's not a guy that's going to need 2 years in the weight room. If they've done any work with him at all in the offseason, this kid could be just special right off the bat.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see that kid play.
I want to see him go. You got to love that big edge rushing DN causing havoc. And on the flip side, again,
and you don't see that going to Oregon very often.
No, and on the flip side, again, you have, freshmen the first time in, I think, since 75 or something like that Auburn started a true freshman at quarterback in Bo Nix. You have freshman on freshman, man. But Thibodeau gets, in my mind, the advantage because he doesn't have to think. He just has to hunt.
Yep. Yeah. Again, that's a position where if you are physically there, which at the end it's hard to be because, some of the builds of these guys coming out are huge. This guy's already built, so he could make an impact. If at least you can just have him pin his ears back and go to work. And so I'm just curious. I'm curious to see how he evolves and how quickly it happens. And again, that's a side of the ball that you are not traditionally talking about Oregon. And so I think that's going to be a fun matchup to watch to see what kind of time he gets.
I hear you. It's going to be interesting. Auburn's D-line, like I said, I'm excited about the trenches. I want to see Herbert go. I want to see it high-powered. But I do think that the trench game is going to be very exciting to watch.
Also, I want to see how Auburn runs.
Yeah.
It's been the Kerryon Johnson, and, he ended his career there hurt. How do these young guys, can they get somebody to step to the forefront?
They usually have, if not right out the gates, that about them. By the end of the year, you're like, that guy's pretty good.
Yeah, but last year, I don't really remember a whole lot of guys flashing you traditionally see in an Auburn running back. So we'll see who does. So that's something to watch for. Certainly interesting. It is a neutral site game in Dallas, so certainly an advantage to Auburn. Yeah. But still, there's a distance, so we'll see. And Auburn travels well. We'll see how the Ducks travel. Should be a fun one. Keep us entertained.
Look, you touched on it earlier, how Auburn winning this game, it's good for them, kind of expected, but Oregon must win this game. It's
a statement
really,
game.
Really, not just for them, but for the conference, really, 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 really need to win this game. So I'm excited about it. I do want to have a little fun to close the conversation, and that is fun names on each of the Auburn or Oregon roster. Fun names. So here's one for you. Auburn defensive end. His name is Big Cat Bryant. Like
Okay.
his name, I'm looking in here. I don't see like
It's not a nickname.
name, a nickname. It's Big Cat K-A-T Bryant.
Okay.
Wow.
All right.
So, I mean, first of all, he's from Cordele, Georgia. First of all, if that is his real name, you know, when he came out of the womb, what possessed the parentals to say, we're going to call him Big Cat?
Maybe he was like a 12-pounder.
Jesus, man. I mean, what in the world?
Maybe they were just big Auburn fans.
Maybe. How about on the Oregon side of the ball? You've got Khalif Helassi, Hockey Woods. How about Triquezy Bridges? Triquezy. I like it. Just names that are hard to say. What's this guy's name? Looks like Commodore. Diamador Lenore. Diamador. Sean Dollars.
I'm not familiar with this player, and maybe he's even a starter. But you even do have, as I look through the list, Smoke Monday.
Smoke Monday is the best.
Sophomore D-back from there
There
from
you go.
Auburn.
Did you say D-bag?
I said D-back.
I know. What
Don't
do they
be-
have next? Like Drinks Tuesday?
I don't know. But let me just say, they don't beat the all-time classics like Pig Prather or Pork Chop Womack.
Yes.
Those are some of my all-time favorites.
We'll have to make that a little thing where we find some names that just make you go, like, did your parents really think that was a good idea and they name you that?
Yeah, I will say this. Just have an excellent weekend with this. Enjoy it. It's fun. While I say it will be overreaction weekend, have a little overreaction. Enjoy the intensity.
It's okay to do that. That's why we love college football, because every game matters. Every weekend matters. So you can overreact, because if you come out of this weekend with a loss, whether you're predicted to be one of those teams at the end
Yep.
or not, it's okay. Is our season over already? Right out the gates?
Yep.
I mean, like, you overreact right there. We're done. That's it. If Florida State loses to Boise State, it's boop. We're done. You know, I mean,
Yeah, that's going to be tough, though. I got a little carryover from last
I
season.
feel you. But to your point, it is okay to overreact, because, like I said, every game matters. It is why college football is the greatest sport in the world. And from a guy that grew up in North Jersey, a New York Giants fan, season ticket holder since 1984, it's all about professional sports. Moved to the South, went to Clemson. Man, my eyes opened up. And you know that too, because you've lived out in the Midwest and the Northeast, going to Florida State, getting to experience and know, and even more so after as an alumnus, the passion you have for your team, you bleed with them. You believe that all their wins are yours. That field, your stadium, that is your home as much as it is theirs. So it's a great thing. It's why we love it so much, and it is the greatest. And it's why every game matters.
Yep. Absolutely. Enjoy the weekend. Get a burger with your family and just kick back and enjoy the show.
I know we will, hopefully, for